Hello, folks. We are going to have a look at lesson number 81 as we ready ourselves for our final edition of this course, the final couple of lessons. So here's my screen, and you can see exactly what's going on. We're talking about commission now as part of module 2.17. In reference to the way that we sell radio advertising and how the whole structure works. You know that within a radio station, there is sales departments who are required to essentially fuel the business through sales. So, um, one of the interesting features about radio sales is that it's oftentimes related to commission, right? In many jobs, perhaps in your parents' jobs, you are compensated according to a monthly salary that essentially lines up with your experience, your seniority, your skill level, and relies on the company. And you know how much you get paid after that every month. Radio stations generally have different structures, but the big principle is that commission is an existing thing. Commission is a percentage of the sale total that you deliver that gets paid as a version of your salary. So you have a basic salary, and then depending on how much you earn, your salary will be adjusted for how well you do in terms of your overall sales. So it can really vary from edition to edition, month to month. The principle is that you're paid a percentage of the airtime sales deals that you close. So, if you do badly, if you don't sell properly, your earnings won't be as effective. There's a guaranteed basic in many instances for more junior sales staff in particular. And that means that you are potentially able to earn 5, 10, 15% on every deal you make, which means that there's unlimited potential. If you sell 2 million rand worth of advertising and you get 5%, that means you are able to make an extra 100 grand a month as far as your salary is concerned. So the money is there, the earning potential is there. Oftentimes, that salesperson will then be responsible for the management and the effectiveness of each particular account. Um, there's an old saying, and in this textbook by Valerie Geller, there's a good outtake on it where it speaks about how programming is from Mars and sales is from Venus. You have these two different forces where programming wants a certain way and sales wants another way. And the fact of the matter is that that's an organic and normal experience of radio stations. There should be a tension because programming is about generating specific, powerful, beautiful content that listeners can resonate with. Sales is about pleasing a client, and those two relationships aren't always the case. They aren't always in the same direction. They always kind of have a bit of an inherent tension. If you consider an example, right? Suppose we were trying to advertise with BMW. So they book an outside broadcast. And the breakfast show goes off to BMW to go to a breakfast show from there, right? It's an outside broadcast. The sales team would want every single link dedicated towards talking about BMW, promoting BMW, so that client gets maximum bang for their buck. Whereas in contrast, programming would want to make sure that the mentions are limited. They're there, but they're limited, they're functional, because you want space to make your typical radio show. At least that's what should be the case. So that tension naturally exists. Very different objectives. The objective of the sales team is to reach sales by the target for the day, week, month, year, whatever the case is, and bank as much money as they can. The responsibility of the programming team is to make the listeners happy, make great radio content so that people listen for longer. You need each to survive, but there's an inherent tension. They're different compensated, which means that they work very differently. If you're an on-air presenter, you might work for 5 hours a day, whereas you're a salesperson, you work for 10 hours a day most days. That's the nature of the beast. So the focus is difficult. Sales is always working on the numbers, the next sale. They look at the immediate horizon, whereas programming, you're paid by the hour or by the show. And so no matter when you are on air, you will make money, that same amount of money will be there. So it's less desperate potentially. It's less hungry, but it still is a longer term plan. So there's not that constant comparison with the past that exists. Having said that, it must be a symbiotic relationship. One must always help the other. It can't be a place where too much tension exists. Or certainly, if there's tension, it's got to be managed. In many instances, program managers will often be at odds with sales managers, and station managers who oversee the whole station will be happy with that tension. They like the fact that there's a bit of a division between the two parties. It's important as part of the game. And if you're going to be successful, you have to manage that relationship really well. And remember that one wouldn't work without the other. If your sales team was in charge of programming, very quickly you'd lose listeners, right? And if your programming team was in charge of sales, you would have no money to fund anything with. So, it's a business and that's important. So how do you do that? How do you manage to potentially, work out this healthy relationship? Well, first, the management need to lead by example. So the sales manager and program manager have to acknowledge the differences and find a way to work through things together. If there's tension, resolve it quickly, have a healthy relationship. Station manager is important in lubricating that relationship and making sure that the two sides are nicely balanced out all the time. Having systems in place, so there's protocol. For example, if a client wants to book a specific presenter to do a show that isn't theirs, say, for example, this is Radio 2. So if Tennille is doing breakfast, Kathliso can't be sponsored by or client can't come around and ask, hey, listen, can we remove Tennille and have Kathliso instead? Is that a possibility? Are you allowing that to happen or not? Station by station, how much say does the client have? These systems and processes are necessary, precedents, rules, kind of structures necessary for a radio station to exist in the long run, effectively delivering this kind of return where you have a healthy relationship. When you talk to clients, when you have direct meetings, say for example, you're trying to sell the brand new New Year's Day music festival brought to you by Boston Media House to Hansa, and you go to Hansa, you take the head of sales, you take the head of programming, and you take a presenter with you to go and represent yourselves. You go there to handle the relationship in a healthy way, so you build that like shared front to the clients, because ultimately the same product, right? The presenters do the job of making it personal, but the salespeople are important to make that sale happen in the first place. And then skin in the game. What does that mean? If your show is not necessarily generating sales and you're not doing well commercially, then you might get taken out of the picture. There's no reason you can't be taken off the lineup, because ultimately radio is a business, right? It has to make money. So it's important that presenters feel that they've got skin in the game, which means that if they're not doing their job properly and aren't fulfilling their sales obligations and the commercial imperatives of the radio station, that aren't part of the radio station anymore. It's that simple. Some presenters may feel reluctant to, sell for the radio station. Many feel it's not their job to bring money in, especially in the SABC buildings. Like, their job is content and never really money. But you can't expect to function and be paid if you aren't doing your bit to sell the radio station. You're part of the product. Everyone is selling the station every single day. The producers who produce the drive show, their job is to sell the station really well by making sure all the commercial elements are played out properly. Similarly, the news person, the traffic person, also part of the product that acquires listeners, which must be resold. The marketing person is making the brand more famous because they want to achieve more appeal to listeners and therefore have more pull with clients. Everyone is there to sell the radio station. It's just the sales team is there as a direct sales representative for the radio station. So it's important for presenters to understand that delivering content with strong advertising elements is not just their job, but it's a way to counterweight poor audience numbers. So if your breakfast show is tanking, but your commercial imperatives are still good, you're winning, you're making money, there's a good chance you'll keep your job. If your numbers are great, but your economic results are poor, you may still be in trouble. Numbers are important, but earnings, that's where the real juice lies. And we know that when you have a great relationship with your client as a presenter, you potentially have got a safety net that provides itself for you. A good example is always referenced in a guy called Mark Pilgrim. Rest in peace to an absolute legend of radio in South Africa. He survived on 947 far longer than he probably would have had he not had such a successful top 40 show commercially. His top 40 show lasted for years and years and years, always had a big sponsor. And so that was a source of constant income for the radio station. And so the program managers were like, you know what, dude, do your thing. Like, make your money, you know? That's a nice way of potentially thinking about this process. So yes, always attention. Sales are from Mars, programming from Venus, manage a relationship, and your radio station is there to essentially, make money. And remember that. And you are generally happy at the end of the day. That's what will work for a radio station. All right, cool. That's the gist of this. Hopefully it makes sense. And if you have any questions, please feel free to mail me and I will address them in said mail. Thanks, folks.